So I know that we're called the Valley of the Sun, but of course you have to have noticed that it's getting darker, earlier, there's less daylight hours as we get closer to wintertime, and that actually can harm our mental health sometimes. So joining me this morning, Dr. Kristen Ray from Bayless Integrated Healthcare. Thanks so much for waking up with us, being with us this morning. So we're talking about seasonal affective disorder. Sad.
Sad. It's sad.
Because that's what you feel, right? You suddenly feel sad based on the weather.
Yep, it's also called the winter blues.
That makes sense. So what's going on? What's bothering us about it?
Well, it's a type of depression, so we see a lot of the typical depressive symptoms, but they often start or get worse with the change in the season. So we notice that when the sunlight changes, it affects our circadian rhythm and oftentimes our sleep and mood.
This is fascinating to me because, as we were talking about in the break, I moved here from Oregon, and it's certainly prevalent up in the Pacific Northwest because there's so little sunshine during the winter months. But here, we have abundant sunshine all the time. How can this even happen here? It still happens, though.
It still happens because a lot of times the sunlight, goes away earlier in the evening, and so our bodies are used to going to sleep with the sun. And so when it gets dark, we want to go to sleep and we want to crawl into bed and get under the covers and get warm. And unfortunately, we still have to be productive.
Right.
Oftentimes at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. when it's dark out.
And that's the difference. Is we all want to snuggle up when it's cold out, but this is actual depression that settles in. So what can you do about it?
Well, the good news is there is treatment available, and so I often tell people that if the symptoms are getting worse or if they're present for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and they don't seem like they're getting better, definitely check in with your doctor because there's medications, there's vitamins, there's also therapy interventions that we can do that help alleviate some of those symptoms.
Light therapy is one of them. They want to expose you to more light, or is it like retraining your brain kind of to think it's brighter?
Yeah, but it affects the serotonin and melatonin levels, and so we find that if you spend some time in front of a heat lamp, sometimes it kind of tricks the body into thinking that it's still daylight out, so that's often recommended as well.
What was also interesting we talked about is that you can get sad during the summer months here. It's just the opposite. That's stir crazy because you can't go out.
Yeah, and typically instead of crawling under the covers, people feel really anxious and irritable, and they have a hard time focusing because, again, we're trapped inside and we can't do a lot of activities that we normally do. So,
so I'm not just hot and bothered necessarily. I'm cooped up and I'm angry about it, but sad. Okay, and so we just want people to talk to their doctor. At least now you know you're not alone. It happens.
Yeah, it's actually very common.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Way. We really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.